This is our second budget presentation, and it's an opportunity for the board and the community, those members of the community that are here participating in person, and those members who are participating in the meeting via the live stream, to learn about the status of the proposed budget for next school year, and looking at the budget from the perspective of supporting our students' success for next school year. We begin the presentation this evening by talking about some district highlights. At our last meeting on March 8th, we spoke about the accomplishments of our students, being a top-ranked school district in the Albany region, more than 80 plus school districts, and we always consistently over the last few years have ranked in the top 10. We have two schools in the district, the one that we are in now, Green Meadow and Red Mill, as having been blue ribbon schools, and our state test performance is above the state average. Additionally, our high school has been recognized by U.S. News and World Report as one of the top high schools in the nation, and we have had many accolades for our teachers that we will highlight. The budget is not just about dollars and cents, expenditures and revenues. It's about supporting the success that we've enjoyed as a school district and continuing to improve in both areas of academics, but also our extracurricular activities. We're going to talk about some modifications that have been made to the tax cap formula. At previous meetings, we talked about what goes into the New York State law, which prescribes the amount of increase we can propose in the tax levy each year. It's formally called the 2% tax cap, but it is not a 2% formula. It is a complicated formula, and we have been able to adjust that formula based on some information that we received since March 8th. I will also review some changes that we made on the expenditure side of the budget. To the budget recommendations, we made some adjustments based on the feedback that we received from the board. I'm going to take a little time explaining the difference between the board's authority to increase the overall amount of money that is collected through the tax levy and how tax rates are calculated and what actually goes into the calculation of individual community members' tax bills. There's often some confusion about the difference between what the board has authority to do, what is determined by the state Office of Real Property Services, and what is determined in terms of the value of individual properties, both residential, commercial, which is approved by the town assessor and adjusted by the town assessors. Additionally, we're going to outline the biggest portion of our budget, which is our salaries and benefits. We often say that we are a people business. We need people to serve the students. We need teachers and support staff in our buildings to provide the excellence, and that is the largest portion of our budget, which we're going to highlight this evening. Additionally, we're going to propose replacement of some of our buses. The board is familiar with the fact that our district and our community has authorized in the past the establishment of a bus purchase reserve. We use that bus purchase reserve to lower the amount of money that we have to borrow in terms of interest and principal payments to be able to continue the cycle of replacing aging, high mileage buses with new, more efficient buses. We're going to talk about some changes that we may want to make with the board this evening as we continue to look at our transportation replacement schedule and some of the opportunities that may be provided now with the funds that we have available, as opposed to when we get into a period in which we're going to have to phase out our gas and diesel buses and replace those buses with zero emission buses. Additionally, we have some vehicles for our maintenance and operations department. We've made some adjustments to that proposed additional expenditure. I'm going to talk about that. We're going to talk about future considerations, including our meeting schedule, opportunities for the community to learn more about the budget this spring as we move towards the vote, which will be on the third Tuesday in May. So in terms of highlighting the continued excellence of our district, we boast very proudly that we frequently have our teachers selected as top teachers by Channel 13 News. And of course, we know Steve Lapola is an exceptional social studies teacher, history teacher in our Columbia High School, and he has recently been named a top teacher, and Liz Griffin, who is an extraordinary library media specialist at Red Mill. Last year, we had 2 or 3 teachers recognized. Again, this year, we've had 2 teachers recognized. We have excellence throughout our high school, our middle school, and our elementary school with our top Channel 13 top teachers. Additionally, In addition to making sure that we are offering the best, everybody stand up and cheer to get the lights back on. We can pretend that you were cheering for the budget. Very good, cheering for teachers. In addition to looking at the budget and how the budget supports academic programs in our classrooms, we often emphasize the importance of educating the whole child. In fact, that is one of our board's goals. So music programs, art programs, technology programs, extracurricular clubs. Our kids not only shine in the classroom, but they shine in our jazz band, they shine in our musical performances, including this performance at Columbia High School that occurred just a few weeks ago, a Freaky Friday. I often say that the Columbia High School performances and our Goff Middle School performances are the best show you're going to see north of Broadway. In addition, last weekend, our middle school kids performed in Annie at the middle school, and that was an exceptional performance as well. So the arts bring out the best in the kids, and our teachers who teach music, who teach art, they're not only really creative, but they help kids discover things about themselves that they might not even realize, and their talents shine. Friday night into Saturday, there is an art show. I will put this up on the website. The art show is down in Albany. I forget the name of the place, but I will be there. Maybe Allison Hosier knows where that is. I will put that out to the community. We have several of our students' art being featured in a very selective regional art show. It is open to the public, I believe, on Saturday and Friday night. We received an invitation to attend the award ceremony. So lots of good opportunities for our kids to shine in the district. We can't do that without the budget. Additionally, on our athletic fields and on our courts, our kids perform very well, not only in terms of their competition in sports. For example, the girls indoor track team won the Section 2 championship this year. Both our Columbia boys and our Columbia girls teams won the Section 2 championship in soccer this year. And at our next presentation, we'll be highlighting some other team accomplishments. In addition, we received Scholar Athlete Awards for 11. I'll repeat that. 11 of our fall athletic teams received the academic recognition because of the high grade point averages that our students who participate in our teams maintain. The sports, the arts, the clubs, the involvement supports the academic success. The research is very clear. The more that we have our kids engaged, the better the kids are going to do academically, and they're going to find things about themselves that they may not realize, as I said, and talents that will continue to serve them for the rest of their lives. Additionally, as you saw tonight, the work of the Student Council at Green Meadow, not only projects that they're doing within the school, but they are connecting to the community. Our school district is the center of the community. We often have our students, our staff, our administrators, our board, very involved in the things that are going on in the community. And we encourage, by modeling for our students, the importance of community service. We have had many opportunities for kids, particularly recently as we've gone past COVID, for our kids to re-engage with the community. Community involvement, partnerships with various community agencies and organizations help enhance programs and opportunities for our students. This is just a selection of photos from our most recent One Book, One District, One Community initiative, where our students are taking pictures of themselves as they find Vita, one of the main characters of the book, around the community. Vita is currently at the East Greenbush Community Library, and I believe that will be shifting soon to the YMCA. So if you hadn't had an opportunity to try to find Vita around town, students, staff, community, you can still find her. She'll be at the Y very, very shortly, and she's still at the East Greenbush Community Library. Additionally, Winterfest was back. Our East Greenbush Education Foundation, which is an exceptional board and organization that does so much, working with our transportation department, our district administration. We had a very successful Winterfest. That's important because it invites the community into our schools to see what we're all about. And it also shows appreciation for the community in terms of how they support the school district. We were able to bring back our district participation, our transportation department, This is not Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. This is Rudolph the Red-Nosed School Bus. And our transportation department, under the direction of our new administrator, Dr. McQueen, was very active in participating in the town parade. And I think Dr. McQueen actually was mistaken for an elf at that event, because I saw somebody who looked like her walking around in an elf costume. So lots of community engagement. And again, it brings opportunities for our students. And it also shows appreciation to the community for supporting our budget. Okay, as we move into the numbers, I just want to make the board aware that we have adjusted the tax cap. This will be the tax cap that we will submit to the state. The due date for the submission of that state is approximately when, Linda, do you know?
It was March 1st.
March 1st, thank you. So the adjustment was made because when the level of revenue that you receive through payment in lieu of taxes agreements, which are pilot agreements approved by Rensselaer County IDA, when the amount of pilot revenue that you receive this year decreases next year, you can offset that loss of revenue by raising the tax levy, okay? We're not proposing to raise the tax levy 3.96, but the tax cap allows us to raise that levy up to 3.96 because 3 specific pilots are shifting from the pilot agreements to the tax rolls: FedEx, Upstate Construction, and Eastwick Village. So that's the adjustment that occurred. We confirmed that data with Rensselaer County IDA, and so our tax cap has been adjusted to reflect that. As we move into the specifics about the expenditures, I'm going to have to move a little bit closer to the screen. We've made some adjustments since March 8th, and I want to point these out for our board and community. At our last meeting on March 8th, we had proposed that we needed a full-time at 1.0 FTE to be able to provide a dedicated strings teacher, because the number of kids that are taking strings instruments at the elementary school has increased. In consultation with Scott Holliday, who is our music department chair, and our administrators, we can provide that consistent staff member to teach strings at the elementary school for a half position. So we've adjusted that expenditure down 50% from the $86,400 that was proposed to $43,200. At the Goff Middle School, we are still proposing that we restore a third assistant principal. We believe that that third assistant principal, in combination with some staffing that we're also going to be recommending, will advance the middle school concept and enable us to operate the school with better response and supervision to our students' needs and better oversight and coordination of our program. We've made some adjustments. Mr. Harkin worked with Mr. Stiles, Mr. Newman, and Mr. McHugh and Ms. Hoffman on the schedule and looking at where we might be able to share some staff between the high school and the middle school. There are some needs for some full-time positions at the high school, which are offset in some ways by some changes in other areas. So we've adjusted the proposed 2.75 FTE that we had proposed last time to 2.0, bringing the amount for the 7th and 8th grade down from the proposed 176,000 to 128,000. So everybody cheer for that reduction. Thank you. Additionally, we have talked about trying to transition our middle school back to teaming. We have also talked about the fact that our middle school is currently visiting other middle schools and looking at what they're doing in terms of the middle school, middle level education. If we add one teacher, and thanks to the work of Mr. McHugh, Mr. Newman, and Ms. Hoffman, if we just add one teacher, we can start having the kids assigned to teams. That's teachers in each core area: English, math, science, social studies, and I believe computer literacy or literacy class, have the same kids in common. So the same kids are assigned to the 5 teachers. That promotes better connections and relationships between the teachers and the students. They get to know the students better. It helps the students adjust from transitioning from the 5th grade to the 6th grade. It can be a very tough adjustment for kids as they come from a smaller elementary school into a large middle school of almost 1,000 students. It will foster better relationships between the kids themselves. They'll get to know each other better because they're operating on the same team. They all have the same teachers. and they get to know the teachers better, and the teachers get to know the kids better, and they can do common activities. And if there are children that are struggling or having issues, the teacher teams share and discuss that during their planning time, and they coordinate and they collaborate in ways that help the kids' problems get addressed. So what we have done here is we have maintained the recommendation for the assistant principal. We have adjusted the projected 2.75 staffing needed for 7th and 8th grade down, and we have added 1 teacher at the 6th grade level, and we've adjusted the costs. At Columbia High School, I collaborated with Mr. Jones, the athletic director. We're going to reduce the recommendation that we made last time for a 0.4 PE teacher. We're going to maintain our fitness, nutrition, and wellness coordinator, Mr. Labardi, in the federal funds for 1 more year, so he'll be fully in the federal funds. And we're not going to adjust the current part-time person that we have at the high school up to increase of 0.2. So that will be brought down to 0 additional expenditure. We talked about the need to potentially replace a reading teacher. There were 3 reading teaching positions at the high school this year. 2 of those reading teachers are retiring. We are going to shift 1 of those positions and fill it with an intervention specialist, but based on a review of students' needs, we need to maintain 2 of those 3 positions at the high school, so we'll have to hire a reading teacher to fill that position. Additionally, we are currently operating short on psychologists. We had a psychologist who was working as a retiree, who is no longer working for us. We want to increase our psychologist time about 0.6 from a current part-time person at 0.4 to 1.0. We are getting more special education referrals within the district and also from our schools, our private schools. And school districts under public law are required to provide special education services to resident students who attend private schools. But those students are residents of our district, and we're getting more referrals. And based on Mr. Coyle's recommendation, we think an increase in the staff time. The school psychologists do all the testing, they do the evaluation. There are timelines at which that evaluation needs to be completed, and we're shorthanded right now. Additionally, we previously talked about the organizational structure of our pupil personnel services. We're recommending an additional CSE chair. We are going to transition from a paper system in our human resources office where our employment files, our records, as well as our job postings are generally managed through a paper process. This system, which is called the school front system, is BOCES aidable. So there's a portion of this cost, which is estimated at $57,000. $34,704 of this cost is an initial cost in the first year, basically extra service that transitions the records. They take the records, they look at them, they put them in electronic format, they convert them to electronic format, but that's a one-shot cost. After that, it's $22,296 per year in subsequent years, and it's eligible for BOCES aid at about 63%. So it becomes more affordable after the first year of implementation. We want to continue the good work that Lisa Mahar is doing as our RTI coordinator. We are going to expand her areas, including working not only on ELA and response to intervention, but also she's looking at some of the issues that we can, some of the data and how we can support teachers better in terms of working with social emotional learning and student behaviors. And we've adjusted the professional development budget. We had asked for an additional $25,000 in general fund monies. We've been able to find monies that we can transfer from allocations within the textbook fund and in our federal Title II-A fund. So we're going to zero that out because we have other sources of revenue to pay for that. So Peter Goodwin is going to present a technology plan to provide the board a little bit more information later on regarding the expenditures that are associated with sustaining our network system, our emergency power source, as well as how we can take advantage of E-rate funding that is available to to be able to continue the cycle of replacing our student devices, including our Chromebooks and our Chrome tablets. Additionally, we had proposed 4 varsity assistant coaches for boys and girls basketball and volleyball. We, based on Mr. Jones's review of the number of students that might be interested, he is recommending creating a girls wrestling team. The board previously received a presentation on the Fit for Life course. We are going to purchase that equipment, and we want to spark more interest in kids participating in tennis by having an extramural program where some districts get together and they have kids as young as 6th grade competing in somewhat of a league associated with helping the kids develop an interest in tennis, which is a lifelong sport that kids can play. Additionally, in operation and maintenance, we initially budgeted a request for the dump truck that Mr. Bickle needs at $98,500. We are going to take the salter and the plow out of the additions, and Mr. Bickle has agreed to buy those items in his general maintenance equipment budget. So it would not be an addition. So it enables us to reduce the cost to $83,500. We're continuing our process of replacing all of the blinds that are quite old and dingy in some of our schools. And we have budgeted money for playground repairs, as well as we also have only one custodian working in the evenings at Donald P. Sutherland and Belltop. We want to have an additional person that would be shared on a rotation basis with each of those schools. In the event that we were short a sub in another building, that person would be assigned to cover in the other building. Additionally, we are proposing some additional training for transportation staff. Recently, for example, through arrangements that Mr. Jones made with Dr. McQueen, many of our bus drivers and aides participated in CPR and AED training, and that was very well received. Additionally, there was a request for additional furniture for the transportation office. We reduced that from $25,000 to $10,000, and we budgeted $100,000 in general fund money towards the pre-K. Now, if the state adjusts the pre-K allocation, which both the Assembly and the Senate versions of the budget have said that they support, it all depends on what comes out in the final budget agreement. That $100,000 may not be necessary, but we're not sure, or we may reallocate it for some other purpose, such as class sizes. We're hearing a little bit about class sizes, but we want to wait a little bit before we see what we can do about that because of the new students that are registering and the kids that are moving. So all in all, on the expenditure side of the budget, our team has reduced the overall increase by $102,000. The heating and ventilation technician has been proposed as a new position for the maintenance department. We reviewed the amount of money that we spend each year in contractual services through our vendor. We've outlined that amount here. For example, in the 22-23 school year, which is not complete yet, we have spent on bringing in an outside consultant to maintain our heating and ventilation systems. We have spent $149,472. During a full year last year, we spent more than $166,000. The previous year, we spent $194,000, and we spent $190,000. So there is an initial cost breakdown, which includes an estimated $45 an hour rate, which is a market rate for someone who has an HVAC license. So it would require somebody to have a license, breaking down the benefits. And we always budget for family insurance because we don't know what the employee will receive. So the total salary would be $136,000, $134,000, including the benefits. So right there, we can see that that itself is less than the amount of money that we have been spending on bringing somebody in to do this work. There is a need, and I did not talk about this the last time because we've been doing an extensive review of how this program would work. There is a need to purchase a vehicle, a van with the tools necessary to be able to support the position. There is a possibility that that van could potentially be purchased out of the current year's budget, but we don't know yet. We looked at other vehicles that might be able to be adapted that we have. It's really not possible given the work that others do. So after the initial investment of buying the vehicle, The total is $211,000 next year, but obviously the vehicle would not need to be replaced for some time. And we believe that this model would give us better service for our more modern heating and ventilation systems, which are computer-based, and reduce costs over time. We're also having conversations with the Little Red Schoolhouse, North Greenbush School District. They are looking for somebody to come and do inspections on their HVAC equipment. And we have not yet come to an agreement on that, but that would be a source of revenue where they would pay the East Greenbush Central School District for that HVAC technician to go there periodically to do some work for their district. So all in all, the budget at this point is projected on the revenue side. We are projecting $108,812.882. That matches with our projected budget on the expenditure side, which is $108,812. We've adjusted it from a 4.06% increase projected for next year to a 3.79% increase. We have also reduced, because we've reduced expenditures, the proposed tax levy of 1% that I proposed at the last meeting to a 0.5%. A 0.5%. Does that 0.5% would yield $291,872 to the district. And that is recurring revenue that we would be able to have not only this year to fund our program, but it has a multiplying effect in terms of what happens next year. We've had 2 years of a zero tax levy increase. This is a very small tax levy increase, 0.5%. It yields $291,872 to the district. Additionally, I want to talk about what that 0.5% tax levy might mean. And this is where we get, we're going to get into a little bit of some complicated information. Anyone who wants to know more about this and how the proposed tax levy increase may affect their individual tax bills, it should know that the Board of Education only controls one of several variables that impacts an individual citizen's tax bills. The board can only decide how much to raise the levy, how much money to collect. So if the board supports a 0.5% increase, then we go out and we ask for a budget approval and we collect the money from taxpayers. As far as how that affects your tax rate, that is established and controlled to some degree by your property assessments. What is your property overall value? The board doesn't evaluate property assessments. That's done by the town assessor. Well, we have 6 towns in the East Greenbush School District, and towns assess properties differently. So there's something called equalization rates, and I'm going to explain what that means. So we've taken an example of a $250,000 full value property. And it would be logical to assume that if a house in North Greenbush could sell or has sold recently for $250,000, that homeowner would pay the same amount of taxes on that $250,000 house in North Greenbush as a homeowner in East Greenbush who has a $250,000 home, or Nassau, or any one of the 6 towns that we serve. That's not true because that does become true in general, but only after equalization rates are applied. So equalization rates take that $250,000 full value property, and the state looks at the overall total assessment of properties within that particular municipality and divides it over the full market value of those properties to determine an equalization rate. So in East Greenbush, a full value property at $250,000 on average is assessed at $220,625. We advance the slide, you can see that is an equalization rate of about 88.25%. So in East Greenbush, properties are assessed at about 88.25% of their full market value. Looking at Skodak, properties in Skodak are assessed at approximately 79% of their full market value. And you go down the list. The only community that we serve, and we only have a few properties in Chatham that assess their properties at full market value, is Chatham at 100%. So an equalization rate of 100, it means that the community is assessing its property at full market value. So these equalization rates are used to figure out, once the board establishes the levy, how do you take that pie, the total amount of money collected, and divide it up equitably among different communities who assess their property differently. And that is done by the Office of Real Property Services, which is part of the New York State Department of Taxes. So we took $250,000 fair market value home, and it was the same data that Linda used to present the tax exemption for the volunteer firemen and the emergency ambulance services. We applied our 0.5% tax levy increase to a proposed tax levy of $58,666,419. And we used a measure of how much our property values, how much our tax base within the district is growing. And that's called the taxable growth factor. That's the same formula that's used within the tax cap to be an estimate of how much our property values, our overall tax base is growing. To figure out on average what, and it's not exact, what based on current equalization rates and based on current information that we have, the average taxpayer of a $250,000 average, meaning median, would pay next year if the board determined to raise the tax levy 0.5%. And you can see that many individuals would see no difference in their tax bill, and in some cases, their tax bills will go down. Why is that? Because we're taking a very minimal tax levy increase, and we are spreading it over a growing tax base. We have residential development, we have commercial development. Our district is growing, and we've seen that through the BRAC committee in the enrollment projection report. So we project that many taxpayers won't see a tax increase at all on their bill, and many taxpayers will see a decrease. This is assuming equalization rates. We're using current equalization rates. So those will change. Those will be adjusted in the summer. But just to show the board and the community, the current 22-23 tax rate per thousand in East Greenbush is $16.22 on a $250,000 full value property assessed at $226.25. It would go down to $16.19. Translated into the overall annual tax bill, it's a decrease of $6.62. So just to reemphasize, this is a very small tax levy increase. It raises $291,000 of revenue for the district, which is recurring. It's small in comparison to the rate at which the tax base is growing in the district. And so many district residents will see either no change in their tax bill or a mild decrease in their tax bill. That doesn't mean that nobody will see an increase, but it doesn't mean that that everybody's bill will go up 0.5%. And you have a growing tax base in East Greenbush, and you're putting a very small increase to the levy being spread over a bigger pie. Additionally, currently, I mentioned that our budget is primarily in staff and benefits. We have about 76.8% of our total budget is in personnel costs. That is about the same as it was last year. It might even be a little bit less. But that includes Social Security, teachers' retirement, employee retirement, and other benefits and compensation. As we move into talking about a separate proposition to purchase buses, we have a bus purchase reserve. Monies have been authorized by the community and set aside for the sole purpose of purchasing our buses. The board funds the reserve each year, can add money to the reserve up to a max. We were proposing the purchase of 6 buses. Typically, we would, according to our schedule, replace 8 There are two schools of thought that I want to talk to you about. We may want to make an adjustment to this. One of the things that we've been thinking about is obviously by 2027, we can no longer purchase gas or diesel buses unless the law changes. By 2035, we have to be able to convert our fleet. And we've talked about in the past that that is an unrealistic timeline. However, right now, gas and diesel buses are going up about $30,000 as we look at this for next year. The average lifespan of a 66-passenger bus is approximately 10 to 14 years. So we're thinking it might be prudent to revise this, add 2 additional buses in. By the time those buses get to their lifespan, we will save ourselves some money by the period of time between the 2027 timeline and the 2035 timeline by purchasing these buses now, because we'll have a few more years with them before we have to pull them out of the fleet. So Linda's going to talk to you about this a little bit later on, but we may propose the board revising this year, tonight, after some discussion, to include the purchase of 8 buses, and Linda has a memo to pass out with you. We've had some conversations in the last couple of days. Why do we replace the buses? They're high mileage, and they were purchased many years ago. We have 2009 buses and 2014 buses listed there that are very high mileage. We think if we purchase a couple more buses now, we'll be able to use those buses through the life and save ourselves some money in terms of that period where we have to start converting to electric buses. The bus replacement cycle enables the district to collect 69% of every dollar we spend on a bus, 69 cents of every dollar we spend on a bus we get back from the state. In terms of transportation aid, that 69% goes right back into the transportation reserve. We use that 69% to replenish the reserve to buy future buses. There's a picture of it. And additionally, we've talked about the dump truck and the plan to purchase the plow and the salter out of our general fund equipment line. So between now and the final date in which the board has to adopt the budget, hopefully the state budget will pass. And we'll know exactly whether we're getting the amount of state aid that was projected in the governor's proposal, whether we're getting a little bit less or a little bit more. And once we look at final enrollment, we've left room within the budget to be able to adjust class sizes where necessary. We may have to adjust 1 to 3 positions depending on what happens with enrollment. The proposed budget will be voted on May 16th. There'll be a resolution to purchase the bus reserve, and there'll be election of 3 board members. The original timeline included an April 4th date, our next board meeting, at which we were going to ask the board to adopt the proposed budget. If the board feels that more time is necessary or discussion is necessary, we could move that to April 25th, but we would need to adopt the budget by that date to be able to meet the state timelines for advertising and posting the budget. So between now and April 4th, we'll continue to talk about the budget, collect your feedback. We could either vote on April 4th, we could have another budget workshop on April 4th, see what happens with the state budget, and perhaps vote on April 25th. Another reason to move it to April 25th is we don't have the full board here. We might want to have the full board at the next meeting to kind of take the feedback and make some of the revisions. So we're flexible about it, but April 25th is kind of the drop dead date at which we need to approve the budget. So that was a rather lengthy presentation. I tried to go as quickly as I could. I wanted to address some of the concerns that the board had last time. I'll take any questions or concerns that you have. We'd like some feedback on the overall budget, the information that we provided regarding the proposed tax levy being adjusted down to 0.5%. We want to talk a little bit at this point about the transportation reserve, and I'll take any questions or concerns or ideas that you might have. Thank you.
Go ahead, John.
Why you always look at me?
Because you were writing notes.
Actually, I was doodling and thinking about fishing. No, that's a good observation. I do have some notes, and this will be easy, Jeff. I'm going to go backwards because we talked about the reserve, being that the school bus issue is an important one. Question I have, if the state did not have this law, would we be purchasing these buses?
Yeah, these 6 are really outdated. We're putting a lot into maintaining them, and there's 2 that I asked to take off the list.
Right.
Because I was looking at this originally as, let's save some money within the reserve in case we have to pay more for the electric buses. But there's a different school of thought that says, you know what, by the time we get to that point where we're going to have to recycle these buses and replace them with electric buses, these buses will be at their lifespan and they're cheaper now. So yes, they were on the list originally from the transportation department as part of the replacement schedule. I asked them to take them off, and then through conversations I had with Mike and Linda, I kind of reevaluated that.
Right. So that's where I was going with this. I would support putting the 2 additional buses. We have a need for, the cost is only going up, and trying to figure out what direction Albany is going to go in from year to year is a thing that we can't, I'm not going to think that far ahead of it. Everyone here knows my opinion on what they're trying to do to districts and unfunded mandates. So we knock that one out of the way. This next series of questions are more budget projections for the future. I like the presentation. It's well thought out. We really are prioritizing what the community wants in these budgets, and you're addressing a lot of the needs. So I really appreciate that. Going back to universal pre-K, and you had talked about waiting for some feedback on what the budget's going to be. So my question would be, not this year, but as we move forward, we need to start having the conversation. If they decide to fund this, how would we have an expanded pre-K program? And do we have the ability to have an expanded program without a huge impact in other areas? So that was kind of my thought. I personally, I would love to see the whole community have access to universal pre-K. I understand the cost and the space problems that it creates. So I think we need to start the conversation now. If Albany decides to fund this, which I would love to see, then we could hit the ground running for next year. I'm always thinking about next year's budget. Any thoughts on that?
I do have some thoughts on that. There is, there are at least twice as many applications for pre-K as we have slots right now. I don't know exactly what the number is, but last I checked 2 days ago, it was twice as many as we had slots for.
140.
So now it's a little bit more. It's 140 applications. So I take that as a signal that the community wants a pre-K, universal pre-K program. The other thing that we didn't put on the agenda tonight, but we want to talk to you about at a future meeting, is we have received a request from another community-based organization that would like to open up their building and have a pre-K program. So there are some particulars to that we need to talk about. So we have had potential another provider come forward. We would have to fund that in a similar way that we're funding the program at ECEC and with BOCES. And we just haven't had a chance to really pull that all together yet to talk with the board about.
Yeah, again, I appreciate.
I think if the formula is adjusted in such a way that we're getting more reimbursement for closer to our actual costs, it definitely will save the general fund budget moving forward. Space will still be an issue. But again, you know, depending on where the funding goes, we also have this capital project that we are still putting together, and we may be able to, if we did a feasibility study, look at expansion of facilities. It all comes down to cost and knowing whether that UPK funding is going to remain with as far as the state providing it, and that's an uncertainty.
Right, and that's my concern. So I would support. I really do believe that our community, this is a real need as families, for families today. So I appreciate you having that on the front of your radar. And that is a segue into the second question. We're getting a lot of pushback and inquiries about the classroom sizes at Belltop. And how does it relate to the budget? North Greenbush is an explosion right now with housing and business, and it's just a very big booming community. At some point, Belltop is going to reach a capacity because of, as that community outpaces it. Has there been any indication of how much longer can Belltop take the growth that North Greenbush has? Because this is going to be an ever ongoing thing. And if it is, then that goes into the capital project for spacing and things that we were just talking about with this. So,
Right now, there is still one room at Belltop that is not used as a classroom every day. It is used as like a maker space, like some of the other schools have, and it is used as a meeting space. So I would say there's at least one extra classroom there that could be utilized as another section of a grade level if necessary. The other thing in regard to enrollment at Belltop, based on the projections that we're looking at right now, there are pretty low class sizes in the 4th grade. And so one of the things that may happen is there may need to be a shift of a teacher within that building to cover one of those smaller grades where those classes are going up. So right now, I think Belltop has the capacity to accommodate another classroom. And there is an ability to make a shift in the number of sections at 1st or 2nd grade by shifting a teacher internally within the building. I don't know that that will happen yet. We usually wait to see what happens with the overall enrollment. But when we rezoned a few years ago, and some of the kids that were in neighborhoods that went to Belltop went to Janae and Red Mill, we fixed that problem to the point where there is space available right now to add classes. But we also try to look at that distribution of sections across the entire district to make sure that it's equitable. And at this point in time in the year, a lot can change. Kids can move out of the Belltop area to another district, to another school. We could have more kids coming in to kindergarten that require us to look at kindergarten overall, the number of sections. Right now, as it stands, we think somewhere between 2 sections additional will be needed at Janae, possibly 1 at Belltop, and possibly going down at one other school. So I think it's a +2 or a +3. Is that right? Depending on what we do. But right now, I think it's between +1 and +2 overall K-5.
so as we go forward and thinking about capital projects and class sizes, if we have to do a project to add a classroom or facilities to a certain school, have we, and I apologize, you may have already talked about this, have we made an assessment what building would be best for that?
We haven't made that assessment. We have to convince the state that we don't have room to put the kids in the existing number of classrooms, and that typically requires a capacity study be done. We have asked our architects to do a capacity study in terms of how the schools are being utilized right now. One of the things that often happens is when the state looks at its numbers, it says, well, you can put 27 kids in a classroom, and according to the formula, but realistically, to be able to provide the program to the kids that we expect, putting 27 kids in a classroom is really a financial calculation, not an academic one. So they may often think you have more space than you actually do as far as operational space. The other thing that has happened when the buildings that are built in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, you didn't have as many special education services in the schools. You didn't have as many academic intervention services. You didn't need spaces for psychologists and counselors. So the buildings are being utilized very differently now when they were first designed. And in some ways, the state formula doesn't acknowledge that. They count the number of classrooms times 27 in general, count a little bit more for special ed, and then they figure out whether or not you can justify an addition to a building. And additions generally cost more local taxpayer money than renovations, because the state doesn't aid it at the same rate.
Right.
So we are looking at all of that, though.
Good. I think that's really important. And the other part of this, and just to make an observation, when we go to Belltop with our board meeting, maybe we should have a presentation, because we seem to get a reoccurring theme that every time there's a bubble in the classrooms and we have to increase class size a little bit, people react to that. And they always come back to, well, I moved to here because this school is this way today. Well, I think part of our conversation is explaining to, in a more meeting with public access, and tell them, what actually governs, because you do a very good job of that in responding to folks. But I think it just seems to be a reoccurring issue, and it was for as long as I've been on the board, to no fault of anyone. It's just there's things that go on in North Greenbush and the building that we just can't control. And just it's more of a messaging thing. So that you answered all my questions, and I really appreciate the depth of thought that went into this.
Thank you, John.
Anyone else? So I have just a couple comments. Really good. I really think we've done a really good job narrowing it down and bringing down the rate a little bit more. I think the presentation is really important to explain to the residents that you're most likely not even going to have a tax increase on this. Excuse me. However, I do want to push us a little bit and say, is there anything we can still purchase in 22's budget that will even help us a little in 23 still? I know we're moving some things back and forth. So can we consider even more on that? And then the other thing that always comes up kind of a little bit late is health insurance, and whether we're having any rebates on the health insurance, that we might have some savings. And I kind of remember those things coming in, always having a little bit of savings. So just stuff that I'd like to hear about as we move closer to finalizing it on, have we kind of closed the gaps on those things? Have we moved things if we can? And kind of go forward from there.
I would say, and I'll ask Linda to comment, the benefits projections that are included within the budget are accurate projections of our expenditures for next year. And there isn't a lot of further adjustment that we believe we could make to those. It's more closer to the actual than what we've done in the past.
Okay.
The other thing that we've done, the budget is tighter than it has been in the past. We don't take, for example, a new BOCES program or the pre-K program or something that gets added and simply added on top of the budget. We look very closely line by line at our expenditures. We say, could we not, where is it that we haven't been spending money, and we find room within that existing budget. So we've done that with the health insurance lines, and we're much tighter than we actually have been in the past.
Right. In the past, I think had pretty high estimates, and then we would come in and
Right.
lower it towards the end.
Yeah, we had significant increases in our health insurance rates for next year. Our CDPHP plan is going up 14.2%, and our Highmark Blue Shield plan is going up 9.8%. And then the market increase for prescription is 6.6. So the line item has been increased, but not at that rate. And so in order to accommodate that, we're using some of the reserve that we have for our prescription reserve. And we'll be forecasting to use a little bit of that next year.
Do you think there's risk beyond that then? I mean, if we're not budgeting enough of an increase, do we have risk that we might be short later on and that we won't have the reserve?
The prescription reserve, we should have about 4 months claims in the reserve. We currently have about 6 months.
All right. Good. And then lastly, for me, I completely agree. I think we need to have the other board members at least chime in before we proceed ahead. But I do think we made great progress, and I'm very happy with it. I also support the buses as well at this point. So I'm okay having a conversation about that tonight and trying to move forward.
So what will happen there is Linda's going to pass out something, and when we get to the point where you have to approve the resolution to go out with the notice, we're going to have to change the numbers. And Linda has those numbers on a memo. And I talked to Mike about that today as well. So,
Anything else?
what else?
I just want to say I really like the idea of going back to the teams and staff and the increase of staff that's necessary there. That's such a critical time as the kids transition from elementary school. I know my kids were able to have the teams. That ended up being their friend pool all through middle school. Important for the kids and for
So just on that, when did we stop doing teams? I didn't realize.
There were significant staff cuts that needed to be made, I think 2009.
Okay, so it's been a
Around
while.
2009, before the 2010 school year, because of the gap elimination adjustment. And, you know, you really have no choice when you don't have that revenue, but to do the best you can to reduce staff and keep the school functioning. And that's what was done. That's when the assistant principal was reduced as well. So it's a partial teaming right now. Not all of the kids are assigned to the same teacher because you don't have enough teachers in the schedule to be able to make it work. What this would do additionally the special ed teacher would also be able to collaborate with the team regarding kids that are in there placed in those classrooms in the 6th grade level. So it's bringing back something that was in place that is considered to be by many middle level organizations best practices for middle schools, that those kids have the same teachers in common because of the relationships. And we'll start with 6th grade, and you'll probably expect next year, we'll look at the enrollment in 7th and 8th grade and see what we can do. And again, combination with this, Jim McHugh and the team are taking the staff in various groups out to different middle schools. Next week, they're going, I think it's next week, to Farnsworth Middle School, look at their schedule. They went to Bethlehem a few weeks ago, and they're going to be bringing a presentation to the board on what they're looking at and what they're discovering as they look at other schools. So this is part of a process that we're trying to follow to enable them to implement some of the practices that once were working very effectively, but also to look at new things that are going on in other schools and bring them back to Goff. And that's something that the board said they wanted to see.
Absolutely. I'm fully in support of that as well. It's important for social relationships to be stronger in 6th grade.